So, good evening, everybody. Hope you're all very, very well. I'm going to probably go ahead and start. There's still a few kind of people arriving, but I'll be just introducing at the minute, so I don't think anyone will miss anything important. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. So I'm very aware that, I suppose tonight's talk is free, I'm aware, but I suppose you're paying with your time, with your attention, and there's not too many things out there that are more valuable, in my opinion. So tonight is, I suppose the talk is being run by our Practical Psychology Meetup. And so a Practical Psychology Meetup, so the aim of it really is to help people increase their impact by increasing their effectiveness. And we do this by doing talks around helping people to better understand themselves, better understand what it is they want. So in terms of better understanding yourself, we'll have a talk coming up in January where we're going to talk about personality. And in terms of better understanding what it is that you want, we had a recent talk, for example, on finding meaning and purpose. And then the kind of third major focus of the Practical Psychology Meetup is to help people better understand those practical and psychological barriers that are getting in the way to them achieving those goals. So in the past, we've had talks on things like procrastination and stress generally. And so tonight we're going to have the wonderful Aoife Donovan Lee talk to us tonight about Technostress, which is one of those barriers. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We're going to try and use the chat box extensively tonight. So just to make sure the chat box is working, if that's okay, could I ask people, I'm just going to ask, how is everybody doing today? How's your day going? How's your week going? Can you guys just chat or type into the chat box and just let me know? We just want to make sure it's working. That's okay. And so while you guys are doing that, I'm just going to let you know. So we are going to use the chat box if you've got any questions. So I'm going to keep an eye on it, and Aoife is as well. And if there's any questions we don't get to during the talk, then we will do a Q&A at the end. Also, we will be recording tonight as well. We'll be recording the talk itself, probably not the Q&A at the end, just so people know. That's great. Lots of people. Everyone seems to be having a super week, doing awesome. Thanks, Owen. Doing great from Barry. Rosaline, all is well. Good, thanks from Katrina O'Grady. So thanks very much, guys. So cheers. So again, if you have any questions over the course of the evening, please put them in to the chat box and we'll do our very best to get to them. If not, we'll get to them at the end. And finally, if you have a pen and a piece of paper, it'd be handy. Although tonight is a talk, I suppose Aoife will be putting it to work. So it might be helpful for taking some notes and maybe writing down some bits and pieces. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the wonderful Aoife Donovan Lee.
Hi everyone, thanks a million Jason, and thank you so much for welcoming me to the Practical Psychology Meetup. They're excellent events, so always great to be invited to speak on these. So tonight I'm going to put you to task, as Jason said. So we're going to dive straight in. Normally you get an intro and an agenda, but I'm inverting that, so that's coming. But what I'd like to do is start with an activity. So let's just think about one negative technology habit that is impacting your results. So tell me about one technology habit that is negatively impacting your results. So that could be either at work or in your personal life. So when you think of it, could you add it into the chat box if you feel like doing so you can show everybody else what sort of habits you feel are negatively impacting your results. So while you're doing that, while you're trying to think of something, I can give you a couple of examples. So technology multitasking or task switching is a prime example. This is where you attempt to complete one task on a device and you get distracted because of another application or device. So perfect example, you're sitting at your laptop or your desktop, you're completing a slide deck and an email notification pops up and you go straight to that email. Why is this bad? Well, it's impacting your productivity significantly. After you've been interrupted, it will take you approximately 8 minutes to regain your focus. 8 minutes to regain your focus to get back into the flow of your previous task. And on average, as knowledge workers or technology workers, we're interrupted every 3 to 5 minutes. So I don't know if that shocks some of you or that feels like pretty normal. Another example is where you could turn the alarm off on your phone in the morning, first thing in the morning, and you spend the next 20 minutes or more mindlessly social media scrolling or checking email. So 1/3 of us check our phones within the first 5 minutes of waking up. Assuming that there are quite a few culprits of that here this evening, myself, one in recovery. So if you were to get a handle on those unhealthy technology usage habits, how could you spend those now free pockets of time? You could invest those in your results. So how would you love to use that time? I'd love to start thinking of that. If it was for your development, you could spend that 20 minutes reading those books or doing that online course that could facilitate your next career move. That's 112 hours a year. How many books could you read in 112 hours? So a bit of tough love here this evening. Stop saying that you don't have time. If you're completely honest about the time that you're potentially wasting because of poor technology habits, then you can't really stand over that statement any longer. So how will you spend this extra time? I'm going to have a quick look in the chat box to see your examples. Listening to the notifications on the laptop. Thanks, Roz. Louise, guilty. Reading till my Kindle falls on my face. Too distracted and over scrolling. Yeah, I hear you. So anyone wondering why I started with an activity and by asking you to think of your habit and why I didn't get straight into an introduction or an agenda? Well, there's 2 reasons. So firstly, I want to ensure that everyone is present and in the virtual room with us. And I want you to gift yourself this time today without any other distractions. So given the topic of today's session, why not start changing your technology and task switching habits right now? So please close all other applications now on your device, any that aren't relevant this evening, to remove the temptation to click into anything else while you're attending this session. How often do you do this? Ask yourself. Your response might be that you have too big a workload not to do that. So when you're attending a meeting over Zoom or another video conferencing app, you need to be multitasking. You need to have other applications open. But if that's affecting your mental health or it's hampering with your productivity, that's not sustainable. So why are you accepting this as normal? What can you do to change that for yourself and for your organization? So the second reason that I started the session in this way was to make you aware of your habits, which is the first step to habit change. This is such an important step as we use technology so mindlessly today. And it can feel like an area of your life that you just can't control. Look, there's so many things in the world today that are out of our control. I'm not going to list them off. We're very, very much aware of those things, but don't make this be one of them. So if you're looking to create more space and time in your life for the things that matter to you the most, then let's get a handle on these things. On that note, Superman, ever wondered how some people seem to be exceptional at creating that space for themselves and achieving those results, even though they have the same resources as you? They seem to have some heroic self-discipline gene that you simply weren't born with. They achieve so much, same resources as you. Today, you'll learn their secret. And it's not that they have some superbly developed superpower. If this sounds appealing to you, then please make the most of this session. Be an active learner, not a passive one, or a lurker, hanging around the background, not inputting into the chat box. You know who you are. Be vocal in the chat box, complete the exercises, and make the commitment to yourself to alter your behaviours. I guarantee that you'll learn how and you can achieve more. Be aware of any negative self-talk as well throughout the session. So when we're being challenged or learning something new, we sometimes can hear thoughts going through our minds like, that's not going to work for me, or I'll never be able to change X, Y, or Z, because you feel like it's so ingrained. So just acknowledge them and say, that's not true. Or challenge yourself on them by questioning, why would that be true? So we're going to get into all the exciting stuff shortly, but I firstly wanted to just share my 90-second bit about myself. So here's me and the family, and that's Barry, my husband, and our two gorgeous daughters. So Shifa is 3 and Elmore is 6 months. So before pandemic times, I never would have shared a family photo in my personal introduction. But I believe we all are in a bit of need of some social connection in our lives at the moment. Everything feels quite formal and it feels quite task focused because we've gone virtual. So I picked this photo because it's a perfect snapshot into our lives at the moment. So we tend to spend a lot of time removing the shouty 3-year-old from the face of the baby. So at this point, most of you will have caught my name, but if not, it's Aoife Donovan Lee. I'm Managing Director of Donovan Lee, and I help leaders to make more time to achieve what matters to them the most through development and coaching solutions. I've worked in multinationals from 2004, predominantly eBay and Vodafone, up until last year when I went out on my own. Oh, whoops, giving the game away there. So let me just bring your attention to the neon sign you see on your screen at the moment. If you have an interest in talking to me after the session, if any of these topics are really speaking to you, and we don't go into enough detail here, my email address is on the screen there, aoife@donovanlee.world. So we can pencil in some time for a chat. As we're going through the session today, just make a note of any areas of interest to you and we can chat afterwards for any recommendations that I have on how you can learn more and take some action. So what's in it for you today? Well, you're going to learn about the term technostress and how to recognize when it shows up in your life or in the lives of those around you. I'll briefly discuss the key learning points from my research on technostress for my master's program and how they will help you and or others. And I've devised a very simple 3-step process for changing your unhealthy technology habits and therefore mitigating technostress, which is all what we're here to do today. So what is technostress? I'd love you to share in the chat box what comes to your mind when you hear that term technostress. For some of you, it might conjure up some very specific examples of you being stressed out by technology, like the guy in the photo, particularly over the last 8 months. So presuming it's gotten very intense for some people. So tell me what comes up for you. While you're doing that in the chat box, I'm going to continue on. So would you believe the term technostress first showed up in the research literature in 1984? And it was by a leader in technostress research called Craig Broad. So it seems like a new term to most of us, but the research began to emerge when computers began to become an integral part of our working lives. Since then, the term has grown to encompass so much more. And as the body of research expands, with it grows our awareness of the stressors that cause technostress. I'm going to talk very briefly today about the 5 stressors that were made very popular in the research literature by a couple of academics, namely Tarafdar and T.S. Raghunathan. FYI, there are a number of other very important academics in technostress research. If this is an area of interest for you in terms of academic research, you might be in the minority here today, but please do email me if you're looking for a place to start. I'm just going to have a look in the chat box and see. So Lou says, feeling I need to be constantly available. I'll hold things up if I don't respond across time zones. Yeah, never switching off. Concerning more about my internet strength and my own health. Yeah, thanks, Gareth. And Kira, always accessible through various comms channels. So I'm sure as you're seeing the chat box yourself and other examples that people are really feeling at the moment, and probably a lot of similarities in how you view technostress. So we have a poll coming up. I love a poll. So please listen carefully to the next bit. I'm going to just describe each of these 5 stressors that I mentioned very briefly. So as I'm speaking, I'd like just to ask yourself how much this stressor shows up in your life. So when I'm finished, I'll take the poll, and using that question, I'm really interested to see now what people have to say. So here are the 5. So overload. Technology overload is, well, we now have access to several different forms of communication. technology, and it allows us to receive work-related requests and information from multiple sources simultaneously. This may lead to feelings of communication and technology overload because of technology multitasking. Technology invasion, this is the pervasiveness of technology. It leads us to feeling stressed by the perception that we're always on. So a couple of people had mentioned that already, that feeling of being always connected and the pressure to respond outside of hours. The uncertainty. So changes to technology may leave us feeling unsettled, having to constantly keep up to date on and familiar with new technologies. Insecurity. Some of us may experience job insecurity as a result of the introduction of new technologies and highly skilled rivals. And finally, complexity. Technology may make us feel as though our skills are inadequate. We feel a constant pressure to invest time in learning about new technologies that we're working with. So for the most part, when I mention technostress, people tend to go for overload or invasion, but I want to take a read here this evening. So let's have a look and see if I can just get to the poll. Oh, I might need a bit of help here. I'm not seeing how I can read that. Oh, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we can see some of the answers coming through. We'll wait till we get to the 80% and then we can probably take a good read. So we're a bit 66%. Okay, so we can probably take a pause there. So if everyone can see that, it looks like technology overload and technology invasion coming in at a close second. Obviously it depends on the audience which technostressors show up for people. So I'm not hugely surprised with that. Okay, so my interest in this specific topic began during my psychology master's program about 2 years ago. So I conducted my thesis research last year on technostress with a global organization, and the aim of which was to identify the presence of technology invasion and technology overload, as they were most prevalent for the group here this evening, and the coping strategies that individuals employed to mitigate these two stressors. So I worked with a group of call center support function workers. So they were a group of individuals at different role levels who worked in the areas of project management, training and quality. So we're going to just take a quick look at the findings. So as I'm talking through each finding, I'd like you to ask yourself how relevant each finding or any of the findings are for you as an individual, or if you work for an organization, for your organization. So please add your thoughts to the chat box as they're coming up for you. So some of the main observations from the research under the heading of management and top-down modeling behavior. What does this mean? So although individual contributors within the sample did not feel an overt pressure from management to allow technology to invade their personal lives, they did feel an inner obligation to either check work-related emails outside of office hours or to respond within a self-imposed time frame. So this also tells us that there was a presence of the stressor technology invasion. So behavior modeled by management suggested that there is an expectation on them to be contactable and to respond to emails outside of office hours. So although managers didn't expect employees to conduct work outside of office hours, they were modeling this behavior themselves. So there was a presence of overload and tasks were being deprioritized because of the receipt of new requests via technology. So for example, if someone more senior sent a request to someone, that would take priority over what the individual had been focused on for the day. So it would just throw their to-do list out the window. Participants reported several examples as well of being distracted because of technology. So the invasion, as mentioned, most participants regularly monitored their work phone outside of working hours, which is probably something that a lot of people on here are used to, especially upon hearing an email notification sound. Also, in relation to invasion, there were cases of colleagues' lack of understanding of the boundaries between work and personal life because of technology. So colleagues expecting responses outside of working hours. Also, colleagues contacting individuals on their personal social media platforms with work requests, that came up as well. Ultimately, the perception amongst participants is that a clear usage policy had not been defined by the organisation. So this leaves employees to develop their own interpretation of what is and is not acceptable. So, question for you, does your organisation have an information and communication technology policy? So any kind of a usage policy? If not, is that something that you're looking to do? Is that important for you? Or if you're an individual, do you have your own set of boundaries for your technology usage? Now, the coping strategy. So the sample participants were able to give me a plethora of examples of how they tried to cope with these couple of stressors. So with technology invasion and with technology overload. So for example, some people talked about having a disconnect day. So one day a week where they try not to look at technology. So the phone goes into a drawer in the bedroom and is on silent or whatever. But what they didn't have was a driving why or an intention around why they wanted to have that disconnect day or why they wanted to develop that coping strategy. And without that, you're relying on motivation or willpower. That's simply not really going to work. So let's have a look in the chat box. Yes, there is a policy, but ignored by managers. We've just implemented a new communication charter with rules and errors at channel level based on feedback we've been given from staff. That's great, Fiona. No policy in place, and managers feel there is a need for one. Definitely something that there's always been there, just more prevalent with the pandemic. Okay. So Stephanie, you're going to hear, well, you're probably hearing at the moment more language around the next normal. So strategizing for 2021, and for sure that should be a part of that strategy, should be some kind of a boundary setting or a usage policy for employees. So before we get into the 3-step model as promised this evening, I need to talk about habit formation. So the couple of models that I use to teach people on making and breaking habits are from the research of James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. So first of all, anybody heard of James Clear? His book is quite popular, and you can tell me in the chat. Clear has pulled together lots of research on habit formation, and he's packaged it together with really strong real life examples. So if you're looking to embed what we'll talk about today, I highly recommend reading that. That's Atomic Habits. What Clear says is make tiny changes to gain remarkable results. So Jason, love James Clear, yeah. He has a great weekly newsletter as well with some tips and hints on changing your habits. So not just tech habits, it's for any habits. So you're all here today to change your unhealthy technology habits, beginning today. And all behavior is driven by the desire to solve a problem. Sometimes the problem is that you want to experience some good, or sometimes the problem is that you are experiencing pain and you want to relieve that pain. A habit is a behavior repeated enough times that it becomes automatic. So let's have a look at James Clear's habit loop to help you understand how a habit is formed, and then we'll learn how to break the bad habits and create good ones based on your knowledge of this pattern. So this 4-step pattern, it's the backbone of every habit, and your brain runs through these steps in the same order each time. Cue, craving, response, and reward. So first there's the cue. The cue trains your brain to initiate a behavior. It's a bit of information that predicts your reward. It's something that catches your attention. So an example of a cue is your phone buzzes with a new message. The craving is the motivational force behind any habit. So you crave the change in internal state that the habit provides. And in this case, you want to learn the contents of the message. The response is the actual habit that you perform. So in this example, you grab your phone, you read the message, and the response delivers a reward. So the reward is the end goal of every habit. At least for a moment, rewards deliver contentment and relief from a craving. So you satisfy your craving to read the message, and grabbing your phone becomes associated with your phone buzzing. So in summary, the cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies that craving, and that becomes associated with the cue. So after years of mental programming, we automatically slip into these patterns of thinking and acting. So here's your next exercise. And I'm going to leave you for a minute to do this. So taking your negative technology habit that you chose at the beginning of the session, write or type it out in the following 4 steps. So cue, craving, response, and reward. I'm going to pop the example up on the screen as you're doing that. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. So the cue, the example that I provided was the cue, your phone buzzes. The craving was you want to see the message. The response was you pick up the phone. And your reward is you get to see the contents of that message. So you get that little dopamine or that little neurotransmitter hit upon seeing the message. So if anyone wants to share their 4 steps in the chat, not necessary, but just if you want to share it, you can do so once you have it completed. We'll be sharing these slides as well after the session, so if anybody wants to come back to that, you'll be able to do so. You'll have the outline of the activity there. So I'm going to move on, and we can jump into the 3-step model. So the first step, I'd already mentioned that the first step to making any habit change is to bring your habits into your awareness. So we're going to work on your strategy for one habit today. You can use this model to work on your other habits also. So if you're invested in making it or doing a complete overhaul of your technology habits, you could look at your tech habits over a day and rate your habits in terms of whether they're a neutral habit, a negative habit, or a positive habit. For tonight, we're just going to focus on your one particular habit, and we're going to work through your example of how you'll break that. Your second step in the 3-step model is design. So this is where we'll design your strategy that's going to facilitate your elimination of the bad habits and creation of your great ones. The third one is just do it. So implement and watch the negative self-talk. If you fall off the wagon or you fail at any point, just get back to doing it again. So we're going to break it down and go through each step now. So to start with the diagnosis and bringing your habits into your awareness and making your plan around the ones that are causing you the most angst. So I'm assuming the one that came to your mind at the start is probably the one that gets to you the most and it's getting in your way. So the one we're selected here today is just the one we're going to work on now. So the next step then within the diagnosis is critical to creating and breaking bad habits. So it's identifying your why. So as I've mentioned from my research in the coping strategies piece, what I've noticed with the participants was that they didn't have that driving why as to why they really wanted to stop some of the negative technology habits that they were using. So now it's about finding your why you want to change this habit, and it's about getting to the real reason and making that your driver for change. Otherwise, you're going to rely on things like motivation, which I've mentioned before. It's overrated. So here's an example of how I worked through a habit that I wanted to make or create using the 5 whys. So you've probably heard of the 5 whys for getting to the root cause or the root answer. In this case, it's your root why or your root purpose. So to implement the 5 whys, in my example was I wanted to read more. So why? Why would you want to read more? So you can develop a particular skill. Why do you want to develop that skill? The job that I want requires this skill. Why is this important? I want to get promoted in 12 months' time. Why do you want the promotion? So I can earn more money. And the 5th one, why? So I can create a better life for my family. So that last one, that's the real why, and it's a much more compelling reason for change than I just want to read more. So what will changing this habit do for you? So think of your why. What would be the root answer to your 5 whys? So it could be to do with family. It could be being a role model to your team at work. Why would that be important to you? It could be in relation to hobbies, or it could be something in relation to self-development. And finally, in relation to diet, you really need to reward yourself. So when you're being, So when you've been successful in breaking your habit or making your new habit, and make sure you've got rewards implemented for yourself at key milestones. So make sure you've got a list of rewards as well. So you can, for example, if it was to do with reading, you might buy yourself the next book when you've gotten to read your book within a certain time frame. So if you're looking for inspiration, there's a great website called Develop Good Habits. So they have lots of different examples of rewards, and having a look through them, there are definitely some that you can't enjoy during a lockdown situation. If anyone on the call is in a situation like that at the moment, but there's lots of other examples of how you can reward yourself. So it's important to have your rewards to hand so that you can create those rewards when you're successful at implementing your new habit or breaking your bad habit. So remember Superman? Remember earlier when I'd mentioned those people who they've got extraordinary self-discipline. So they've great success in their lives in numerous areas, and you really admire them for that. So maybe you're even a little bit jealous of them. So disciplined people, they set up their lives in a way that doesn't require heroic self-control. So they spend less time in tempting situations. They design their environment that automates the behaviors that maintain their success and their inner peace. And you can do this too. So you can be the architect of your environment. That's what these so-called self-discipline for yourself by doing this too. So how do you design your environment in this way? You increase your exposure to positive cues and you decrease your exposure to the negative ones. So the 2 most obvious cues for habits to take place are time and location. So for example, every morning at 11 o'clock, I have a cup of tea. I'm like clockwork. Or every time I sit at my kitchen table, I reach for my phone to check the news. Visual cues are the greatest catalyst in your behavior. It's so easy not to read the book when it's tucked away on the shelf. So because of remote working, you might have cues to start working in several places around your home. Wouldn't everyone love if this was your view from your living room? For example, you might work sometimes from the couch or from the kitchen table, which makes it difficult to stop working in the evenings. There's no clear division between the end of work time and the beginning of personal time. So whenever possible, avoid mixing the context of one habit with another. If your space is limited, divide your room into activity zones. So the armchair is for personal reading. The couch is for relaxing. One seat at the kitchen table is for working. And do the same with your technology. Use the laptop only for work. Use your tablet only for reading. And use your phone only for social media. Habits thrive under predictable circumstances like this, and a stable environment where everything has a purpose and everything has a place, is an environment where habits can easily form. So remember, every habit is initiated by a cue. Make the cues of good habits obvious in your environment, and gradually your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the content surrounding the behavior. The context becomes the cue. Another great read in relation to this is Willpower Doesn't Work. It's by a guy called Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So if you didn't catch that, it's Willpower Doesn't Work by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So both himself and James Clear in Atomic Habits talk about this similar creating your environment to create great habits. So in order to learn how to break a habit, we must first learn how to make a habit. So using the 4 laws of behavior change, this is what's outlined on the screen right now. So on the left, you'll see the 4 laws of behavior change. So here's an example, again, with me and my reading. So I wanted to read more while on maternity leave. And my why was because I wanted to upskill myself on certain topics to be in a position to set up my new business venture by the time maternity leave was up. Why? Because I wanted to continue to work for myself and to never have to work for someone else again. So it's a pretty compelling reason why. So remember that compelling why. Drill down far enough so that it gives you that fire that you need to practice the good habit or break the bad one. So in order to do this, using the 4 laws of behavior change for breaking bad habits and creating good ones, my cue was to make it obvious. And for me, that was the baby's nap time. So that's happening at the same time every day. And that was my cue. For the craving, make it attractive. So with each new chapter, I was upskilling myself and bringing myself closer to my goal. I was visualizing myself teaching people about what I was learning. Response, I wanted to make it easy in accordance with the 4 laws of behavior change. So have the books that were top of my reading list already downloaded and keep my Kindle in my reading spot, which was on the couch. And then the reward was to make it satisfying. So I'd make sure I'd reward myself. So when I'd have a book read, I'd reward myself by buying a new book. So to break a habit, you invert the 4 laws. So make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. That's how you break a habit. So now that you know how to make a habit and break a habit, let's do an exercise on breaking your bad technology habit. So we're going to take your example and we're going to use the 4 laws of behavior change inverted to break your habit. So I'll bring them back up there. Make it invisible. How could you make your cue invisible? How could you make your craving unattractive? How could you make it difficult? So make the response difficult. And how could you make the reward for doing that bad technology habit unsatisfying? So I'll give you an example. So in order to maybe break a social media addiction, cue, keep your phone out of sight. So if there's a particular cue, like a time of day that you would normally reach for the phone, it should be out of sight. Delete the applications. So delete your social media applications from the phone and make it that much more difficult. Your response, there are apps like Freedom or similar apps that help you to create rules around blocking social media applications from your phone. They just help dictate your use a little bit better. And for your reward, always think of your why. Think of why you're doing it when you feel that craving coming on to look at social media, as it is in this example, or whatever your technology, your poor habit is that's negatively impacting your results. So remind yourself of your why. What is doing this behavior keeping you from achieving? So remember your why. So if you haven't already, I'd like you to start to do that. So with the 4 laws of behavior change inverted, just bring yourself through your example. The example is there on the screen to help you. And And you can let me know in the chat box if you've been able to do that, if you're having any trouble with that. And I'll just have a look at the chat box to see has anybody shared. Oh, Kira has cue, wake up craving, see what's happening on Instagram. Yeah. Response, pick up phone, mindlessly scroll. Not sure there is a reward. Yeah. It can feel, it can leave us feeling a little bit empty sometimes, having done a mindless scroll on Instagram. And the time just goes by so quickly. Yeah, Jason Q, turn off my notifications when I'm trying to focus. Absolutely. And Gareth, my new phone has better well-being software to limit or block apps. I really should explore these and activate them. Great. Making it difficult would be my best detractor. Yeah. Absolutely. So there is software already on phones as well. Sarah, Freedom app's a great tip. Definitely need some limits put on it. The phone in the next room. Yeah. Remove work apps from my phone. Blue. Yeah. Lower the volume on my laptop, Roz, when I'm on break. Yeah. And Fiona, I struggle with this as my work phone and personal one are the same. Yeah. Sounds like Freedom app could be a winner. Yeah. Kira, don't bring phone to bed. Oh yeah. Does the kids have my phone so I can't look at? Absolutely, Phil. And they get lots of screen time and quiet time for you. Win-win. Don't charge the Kindle, yeah. Okay, so hopefully you're getting to see some great examples from people, from others, as to how you might be able to break your poor technology habits. Okay, so let's move on then to the do part of the 3-step model. So now that you have a clear strategy, it's just about practicing. So if you fail, like I've mentioned before, don't berate yourself, just acknowledge it and reset. So the next opportunity to get yourself back on track and identify as the type of person who behaves in this way. So yes, I allowed myself to scroll mindlessly that time, but the next opportunity this comes up, I'm the type of person who avoids that. Remember your rewards and your why. So in summary, the 3-step model, in order to change, we need to start by becoming aware of our habits. So diagnose your habits and find your why. Then we need to design our strategy using the habit loop and the 4 laws of behavior change. And then we just start doing it. So at the beginning of the session, I'd asked you to think about a technology habit that wasn't serving you or that was getting in your way. So now you have a strategy for breaking this habit on a scale of 1 to 10. How committed are you to breaking this habit? Can you tell me in the chat box? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to breaking this habit? And pop it in the chat. If it's not a 10, Rosalind 10, good woman, ask yourself why. So maybe you've taken on too much. Jason 9.9, Paul 9, and some 10s. Have you taken on too much if it's not quite there at a 10? Remember, it's about small tweaks to make remarkable changes. So don't try to bite off more than you can chew, or else question yourself on your why. So do you have a compelling enough reason for change? Although some people would just say, I never give a 10 for anything. Sean at 9, Katrina 8-ish. Okay, so just question yourself, why is it not a 10? And is there something that needs to be tweaked there? Or maybe you just don't ever give a 10. You're just that kind of person. Okay, so for key takeaways, I'd love to hear in the chat what your most valuable takeaway was from today. So to recap what we covered, we started by bringing some of your unhealthy technology habits into your awareness, and then we looked at the term technostress, what it encompasses. You identified the stressor that shows up most in your life. For most of you, it was overload and invasion. We discussed the research findings, and you identified how this research might be of use to you and or your organization. And we looked at the habit loop and the 4 laws of behavior change. So how you can use these models to break bad habits and create great ones. And finally, we implemented the 3-step model to design your own strategy. So getting some Valuable takeaways: breaking, making a habit, love breaking a habit, 4-step plan, 4 laws, the habit loop, becoming self-disciplined unicorn. Fiona, knowing it's not just me. Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, no one has heroic self-discipline habits, so it's super fair. Absolutely. And Lou, creating the defined boundaries. Yeah. Phil, 4 laws. Linda, the habit loop, freedom, 5 whys. And that can, the 5 whys can be implemented for lots of different, in lots of different ways. Find your why in general. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, great. And identify how it became in the first place. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for all of those. So finally, I hope that today's session has been valuable. It's my mission to help people create more time for the things that matter to them the most. So I'd love to hear your success stories or any other aha moments that you'd like to share with me. I'm always eager to talk about this stuff. I hope that's come across today. If you could see us potentially working together in the future in order to achieve those goals, there are 3 suggestions that I have as to how we could make that happen. So I've created a ready-to-go course for individuals and for organizations. That's my Technostress Survival. But I can also create a bespoke course for you and your organization based on your needs. And finally, I can work with the individual on a one-to-one coaching basis. So here are the ways to get in touch as well if you'd like to explore any of those options further. So there's my email address again, and please look me up on LinkedIn and we connect via that way as well. So thanks a million for joining today's session. I've really appreciated your engagement in the chat, and I hope we've given you lots of value. So thanks again to Jason as well and the Practical Psychology Meetup. I'm going to hand back over to Jason now for Q&A and any wrap up as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aoife. That was great. I'd also like to say thanks to everyone for coming down as well and checking this out.